Alright everyone, today we are going to start our quest. We are going to go from 1 to ideally 60 with Teflon Stoic, and throughout the way we're going to be listening to writings on Stoicism. So let's become better Stoics and play hardcore WoW and not die. Let's go.
And education. Marcus Aurelius was born as Marcus Annius Verus on April 26, 121 AD, into a prominent Roman family. His paternal grandfather, Marcus Annius Verus, was a twice-serving consul and even city prefect of Rome. Marcus's father died while serving as praetor, when Marcus was only a small child.
What's so? Well, aren't you a sturdy-looking one? Perhaps you can assist me with a thing or two. Not much help around here except for green apprentices, and they've other things to worry about.
The Emperor Hadrian took a personal
What do we have
interest
here?
in the talented
You look
child.
as though you might need something to keep your hands warm, HM.
Yes.
Yes.
Most true. A playful compliment to the boy's upright character and a pun on his family name, Verus. This early imperial favor marked Marcus as a youth of unusual promise,
Well, my
though
action
no one
bars.
yet imagined he would one day wear the imperial purple. Marcus's education was that of a young Roman aristocrat, but even in boyhood he displayed a serious, studious nature. According to the biographer of the Historia Augusta, a collection of imperial biographies of debated reliability, he was devoted to philosophy as long as he lived. From a young age, Marcus was trained in literature and rhetoric, the standard curriculum for a future statesman. He had private tutors for Latin and Greek. As a Roman noble who became effectively bilingual, he read and spoke Greek as fluently as Latin. His lessons would have included reading Homer's Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid, studying the speeches of Demosthenes and Cicero, and practicing rhetorical declamations on historical and imaginary scenarios.
We got a lot more tough
This rigorous
wolf meat
training
to
in
get.
eloquence prepared him for public life, as mastery of rhetoric was the key to an active political career under the empire.
I feel like dwarves run fast.
Beyond letters, Marcus showed an early turn toward philosophy. At age 12, he famously adopted the dress of a philosopher, donning a rough Greek cloak, and even took to sleeping on the ground to toughen himself.
Sleeping on the ground's good.
His mother,
I sleep on the ground
Bishop
quite
Lucilla,
frequently,
had
guys.
to persuade him, with some difficulty, to return to a bed with blankets instead of bare floor. Marcus's youthful asceticism,
That is
recorded
something
by
a mother
later
would
biographers,
tell you to
reveals
do.
how earnestly he embraced the Stoic ideal of hearty self-discipline. Indeed, the Historia Augusta portrays him as a serious child who loved boxing, wrestling, running, and hunting in his youth, balancing physical exercise with intellectual zeal. Young Marcus Aurelius, the Uffizi Gallery, Florence. The young Marcus benefited from a cadre of excellent tutors and mentors.
Cadre. I'm going to have to look
For
that
Latin
word up.
oratory, he studied under Marcus Cornelius Fronto, a renowned rhetorician from North Africa. Fronto's letters to Marcus, which survive, show a close, affectionate relationship between teacher and pupil, and also Fronto's chagrin as Marcus's interest shifted from rhetoric to philosophy. In Greek rhetoric, Marcus's instructor was the famous Athenian sophist Aristides Atticus, whose flamboyant personality and wealth made him a celebrity tutor in Antonine Rome. Under these masters, Marcus became an accomplished speaker and writer in both languages. Yet even as he excelled in eloquence, his heart increasingly belonged to philosophy, a fact noted with some regret by Fronto, who realized his star pupil was delving ever more deeply into philosophy at the expense of rhetorical display.
Too much going on.
For Marcus, it seems, while rhetoric offered the tools for public life, philosophy promised something more fundamental.
I love Seal of
A path
Righteousness.
to inner understanding.
Are we going to be going
framework for
holy?
living virtuously. Marcus's philosophical
Not because
education
it's
was guided
efficient.
by some of the leading thinkers of the day, especially Stoic philosophers. It was taught by Apollonius of Chalcedon, a Stoic whom Marcus respected so much that even after joining the imperial family, he would go to Apollonius's house for lessons. Another major influence was Quintus Junius Rusticus, a statesman and Stoic whom Marcus later regarded as one of his most important mentors. Rusticus, who was learned in Stoic doctrine, became a kind of philosophical counselor to Marcus, whom Marcus shared all his counsels, both public
Hunter.
and private.
He'll probably
In
die before
Meditations
10.
1.7, Marcus gratefully credits Rusticus for teaching him serious philosophical habits, including introducing him to the lectures of Epictetus. Other Stoics taught Marcus as well, such as Sextus of Chaeronea, the nephew of Plutarch.
Hey, level 2, guys. Oh,
Marcus
yeah.
even dabbled in Aristotelian thought under Claudius
59 to
Severus,
go.
a peripatetic philosopher, showing his intellectual openness. By his late teens, Marcus was immersed in philosophy. He studied philosophy with ardor, even as a youth, never treating it as a mere academic subject, but as a guide to living well. His practical approach to philosophy will define his character. As modern scholar Pierre Hadot observes,
Okay, let's turn it in, guys. Ooh, we might have something. Ooh, yeah, we got a belt.
Exercises, a form of personal
We got a
self-improvement
vest.
practice. Marcus
I
himself
don't really
thought of
need a shield.
philosophy not as a boastful title, but as
Keep a
medicine
shield
for
just
the
in
soul.
case, but
Not a profession,
My
but like the
brother,
soothing
Samir,
ointment
and
for
I
eye
were sent to
inflammation,
different parts of Don
as he
Baroque
reminds
to
himself in
investigate the
Meditations
threat posed by the
5.9.
trolls. The Senate has its hands full
While
with
honing his
trolls,
mind,
so they've
Marcus
no
did not
need for
neglect
further
more
analysis.
practical education
From
for
what I've
governance.
seen, the trolls
He received
aren't
training in
well
law and
situated here in
administration,
Coleridge Valley,
essentially by
mostly
apprenticeship.
the southern cave.
Under the
I'd
guidance of
say
older
that the
public
army
servants
would
like
not be
Rusticus,
necessary.
he learned how to
I think
handle legal
strong
cases and
arms should be
imperial
more than
correspondence.
enough. Perhaps you'd like
Most
to assist
importantly,
in this
Marcus was
endeavor.
profoundly influenced by the example of his adopted father, Antoninus Pius. As he later wrote,
Antonius
from Antoninus, he learned
Pius.
modesty,
I like
integrity, tireless
that
diligence,
name.
and devotion to duty, qualities he enumerates gratefully in Meditations 1.17.
Everyone's already killed the boars.
For some 23 years, Antoninus Pius would be Marcus's model of a just ruler, and Marcus observed him closely as Antoninus received
Hey, a
embassies,
piggy.
tried legal cases, and dictated
Oh,
letters to
several
his son.
piggies.
This was on-the-job imperial training of the highest order. By the time Marcus reached adulthood, he was one of the best educated men in the empire, not only in literature and law, but in the wisdom of the philosophers that would later earn him the title of the Philosopher King. Rise to power and political career. Roman Empire under Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius's path to the throne was unusual, shaped by imperial adoption rather than blood succession. In July 138
Isn't
AD,
that unusual?
Emperor Hadrian lay dying without a biological son. Hadrian had earlier adopted a certain Lucius Cionius Commodus as heir, but when Lucius died unexpectedly, Hadrian turned to a respected senator, Antoninus Pius. Hadrian's condition was that Antoninus in turn adopt two youths, Marcus, then 17 and a nephew of Antoninus's wife, and the 7-year-old son of the late Lucius, who was renamed Lucius Verus.
Lucius Verus.
Thus, in 138, Marcus Annius Verus became Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, taking the nomen of his new father. Hadrian's death that year left the crown to Antoninus Pius, with Marcus clearly marked out as next in line.
Ooh, bracers,
From
leather
that moment,
bracers,
Marcus
guys,
was
watch
groomed as
out.
a future emperor.
We now have
As heir apparent under Antoninus
little
Pius,
armor.
reigned 138 to 161, Marcus occupied high offices early. The Senate held him in esteem, and at the age of 18, 139, he was given the title Caesar as junior co-ruler. In 140, at just 19, he served his first term as consul, an unprecedented honor for one so young. He would serve as consul again in 145. To solidify the imperial family bonds, Marcus was married in 145 to Faustina the Younger, the daughter of Antoninus Pius.
Faustina the Younger.
Faustina was not only his cousin, but now also his adoptive sister due to the imperial adoption. Their marriage made Marcus Antoninus a son-in-law as well as son by adoption. Marcus and Faustina's union was reportedly a happy one, producing numerous children, at least 13 over the years, though many died in childhood.
Yeah, that used to happen a lot, guys.
And 150s,
Until
Marcus's
recently,
public profile
you didn't
grew,
even chance
though
for your
Antoninus
child to make it
Pius's reign
to
was so peaceful and uneventful that contemporary
about 5
history
years
say
old.
little of Marcus's activities in this period. Edward Gibbon later quipped that the reign of Pius furnished very few materials for history, since it was not marred by crimes, follies, and misfortunes. In such calm years, Marcus's life at court likely
let's
consisted of
turn
learning
this in.
statecraft from Pius, managing routine
Look at the bunny.
administrative tasks,
Hello,
and
bunny.
deepening his philosophical practice. Letters to Fronto show Marcus sometimes felt ill
Another
or overworked,
paladin.
but remained dutiful.
How are ya?
By the late 150s, observers could see in Marcus a man devoted equally to the two poles of
I
his
want the
life,
boar handler's
imperial court and
gloves.
philosophy.
One of these should fit you.
Unlike some who experienced a
Do
sudden
this.
conversion to philosophy, Marcus seems to have integrated philosophy gradually and steadily into his life, until it became increasingly central to his life, alongside his political responsibilities. Upon Antoninus Pius's death in March 161, the 40-year-old Marcus Aurelius succeeded to the rulership of the Roman Empire. He had been effectively crowned prince for over 2 decades and was well prepared to assume power. One of his first acts illustrates Marcus's character and his respect for obligation. He insisted that his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, now
There he is.
31 years old, be elevated as co-emperor, honoring Hadrian's original plan.
Anything I can
Thus, for
learn?
the first time in Roman
Ooh.
history, the empire had 2 joint Augusti of formally equal standing.
Can I not afford that? Oh,
In
I need
truth,
some money.
Marcus was senior.
We'll sell something.
The Senate acknowledged him as Augustus and Pontifex
I
Maximus.
won't need this. I can heal.
Immediately.
I don't need
While
this.
Lucius
Blah,
received
blah,
these
blah,
honors
blah,
slightly
blah,
later.
blah. Keep the shield.
Marcus scrupulously shared
1
imperial
silver.
privileges with Lucius,
We're good to go.
even giving him Antoninus Pius's name. Lucius was styled Lucius Aurelius Verus. This
Huge
co-emperorship was a
force.
novel
55
arrangement
armor.
born from Marcus's sense of duty and perhaps his genuine affection for Lucius, who had grown up with him in Antoninus's household. Gold aureus minted in Rome in 161 AD, with the 2 emperors shaking hands. Marcus's accession was smooth
Hey,
and constitutional.
Look a lot alike.
The
I've got
Senate
more
hailed
hair
his
though.
virtues, and he, in turn, stressed continuity with Pius's policies. One of Marcus's first priorities was carrying out his
Someone
predecessor's
died.
wishes. An anecdote related in the Historia Augusta claims that Marcus, on the very day of Pius's death, declined to dine in the palace and spent the night in vigil, as if to immediately embrace the austerity of ruling. While possibly embellished in the source's characteristic style, the story aligns with his known Stoic sense of responsibility. Co-emperors Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, British Museum, London. As emperor, Marcus Aurelius initially enjoyed a few years of relative tranquility in Rome. He and Lucius Verus presided over games and distributions to curry favor with the people and army, following tradition. Marcus also continued Pius's style of conscientious administration. He was deeply involved in legal work, rescripting petitions, rendering judgments, and refining laws. A later chronicle praises Marcus for personally hearing disputes and showing great diligence in dispensing justice. In his own writings, Marcus constantly reminded himself to be fair, patient, and to fulfill the social duties of his station. One area where he left a mark was in legislation protecting the vulnerable. For example, he apparently strengthened the rights of slaves and minors in law. One source notes that
Level
Marcus
3, guys.
for the rights of women, children, and slaves, suggesting he enacted or upheld humane policies toward these groups. Indeed, legal historians credit the Antonine period with measures like requiring the freeing of slave girls abused by masters and easing inheritance laws for sons and daughters, reforms in line with Stoic humanitarianism. Marcus's personal austerity and high ethical standards set the tone for his government. He was frugal with public funds and cautious about extravagance, a necessity as much as a virtue given looming crises. He declined excessive honors and delayed accepting triumphal titles until fully earned. Frugality sometimes made him seem severe. One ancient comment was that he encouraged the arrogance of the court by avoiding the common festivities and lavish entertainments his predecessors indulged. But Marcus was deliberately modest. For example, after victories, he would often refuse to be hailed imperator more times than appropriate, and the Historia Augusta notes that he feared and deprecated nothing more than a reputation for covetousness, constantly trying to clear himself of any suspicion.
Ooh, guys, we got a male vest.
By all accounts, even hostile ones,
Oh, yeah.
Marcus's character as emperor was marked by sincerity, simplicity, and hard work. The senator historian
Burly
Cassius
rockjaw
Dio, who
trog.
lived under Marcus,
And there's
summed up his
I already got
governance.
you.
So temperately and so firmly did he rule that, even when involved in so many and so great wars, he did nothing unseemly either from flattery or from fear. So truly was he a good man and devoid of all pretense. These virtues would soon be put to the test. Marcus's reign fated to last 19 years, 161 to 180, quickly turned from peaceful to tumultuous. The philosopher king would spend much of his emperorship at war or facing dire challenges, revealing the steel behind his Stoic principles. The years of calm governance were short. By the early 160s, a storm of crises hit the empire. Marcus Aurelius would prove himself as a leader under almost relentless strain. War on the eastern frontier, Parthian campaigns.
Parthians.
Not long after Marcus assumed power, the Roman Empire's long-standing rivalry with Parthia flared into open war. The Parthian Empire in the east,
Parthians were
in
pretty
what is
cool.
now Iran and Mesopotamia, was Rome's only formidable peer competitor, and tensions had simmered for decades in a kind of Cold War. The death of Antoninus Pius and the accession of two relatively inexperienced emperors in 161 may have emboldened the Parthian king Vologases IV to test Rome's resolve. In 161
Piggies.
or 162, Parthian forces invaded the kingdom
Need
of
some more
Armenia,
piggies.
a Roman client state, and expelled the Roman-installed king. They even overran a Roman legion stationed there, inflicting a humiliating defeat. By 162, the Parthians pushed into Roman Syria, threatening the vital eastern provinces. This news was a grave alarm, as Marcus surely recalled.
Ooh,
His
got some
adoptive
shoes.
grandfather Hadrian had faced a massive Jewish revolt in the east, and Trajan before him fought hard wars against Parthia. Now the stability Antoninus had enjoyed was shattered.
Trouble in Iran
but to
and in
respond to
Israel.
this aggression.
Sounds familiar.
Marcus Aurelius made a crucial decision. He sent his co-emperor Lucius Verus to lead the war effort in the east, while Marcus himself stayed in the west to manage the empire.
This was probably
Verus
wise.
departed for the eastern front in 162,
Piggy.
establishing his headquarters in Antioch, Syria. Though officially supreme commander, Lucius Verus was not a seasoned general. In fact, neither he nor Marcus had any prior military experience due to the long peace under Pius. Scene of war between Romans and Parthians. Parthian monument, Ephesus. This lack of first-hand battlefield command in both emperors was an unusual, potentially precarious situation for Rome, as it faced a major
Look at that
conflict
hill.
on a critical frontier.
It's a nice hill.
Marcus likely recognized this and ensured capable generals took charge under Lucius's nominal leadership. The campaign was entrusted to professionals like Gaius Avidius Cassius, an energetic young general. After some initial setbacks, the Roman forces rallied. Over 163 to 165, generals working with Verus won a series of victories. They retook Armenia, defeated the Parthians in battle in Mesopotamia, and even captured the Parthian capital, Ctesiphon, on the Tigris.
Ctesiphon.
By 166,
I'll try to
Parthia
remember
sued for
the
peace,
Parthian
and
capital
Rome
was
emerged
Ctesiphon.
victorious. Lucius Verus basked in the glory. He took the honorific Parthicus Maximus and celebrated a triumph jointly with Marcus in Rome in October 166. Cassius Dio records that Lucius gloried in these exploits, while perhaps privately, Marcus coordinated strategy behind the scenes. In any case, the war ended with Rome's eastern frontier secured. Parthia was
Let's
dealt
sell
a
some
punitive
treasures
peace
here,
and
guys.
would remain relatively quiet for the near future. However, this victory came at a terrible, unseen cost. Returning legions brought back to the west a deadly plague, likely smallpox or measles, the Antonine plague. Outbreaks began in the east around
Antonine
165
plague.
and followed
Heard
the
about
army
this.
along trade routes back to the Roman heartland. By 166 to 167, the plague was ravaging Italy and the provinces. Ancient accounts describe high mortality. Modern estimates suggest the Antonine plague may have killed 10 to 20% of the population in some areas.
That's incredible.
Cassius Dio later wrote that during Marcus's reign, many people died. There was pestilence, whatever it was, a typically understated description. The epidemic struck the Roman army especially hard, decimating the legions just when new threats were emerging. Marcus and Lucius found their victory parades overshadowed by the specter of pestilence and its social and economic fallout. The plague would linger in waves for years, sapping the empire's manpower and morale. Marcus Aurelius, with his rational mindset, could do little against a microscopic foe. He could only respond with measures to maintain order. Coins from his reign invoked deities for health and safety, indicating imperial efforts to appease the gods and console the populace. The plague was one of the many great troubles that Marcus faced, and he could only meet it with endurance and care, qualities he often reflected upon in his meditations. The Eastern War thus concluded successfully by 166, but its after effects were dire.
Here we go.
For Marcus personally, one positive outcome of the Parthian War was the distinction and loyalty won by Avidius
Leather
Cassius,
pants.
the general who had spearheaded the campaign.
A little warmer.
Cassius, a formidable commander, was rewarded with authority over the eastern provinces. This appointment would have consequences later. In the short term, however, Marcus must have felt relief that the eastern frontier was pacified. Little could he rest, though, for almost immediately a new conflagration erupted, this time on the northern frontiers of the Empire, even more dangerous and relentless than the eastern conflict. War on the northern frontier, the Marcomannic Wars. Even as the ink was drying on peace with Parthia, Rome's northern frontier descended into crisis. Along the vast Danube and Rhine borders, numerous barbarian tribes, Germans, Sarmatians, and
level
others,
4.
had been growing restless. Some were being pushed by migrations of more distant peoples, possibly Goths moving into Eastern Europe. Others were enticed by the wealth of Rome. In 166 and 167 AD, these pressures suddenly turned into a full-scale barbarian invasion of Roman territory.
Oh, we gotta get up there.
Marcus Aurelius now faced what would be the defining struggle of his reign, the Marcomannic Wars, named after one of the major Germanic
4
tribes.
minutes. So we better head
Toli
there.
Pietrosante, Columna Claudius, and Aurelio Antonino Augusto, 1704. The northern threat was multifaceted. Key tribes included the Marcomanni and Quadi, Germanic peoples from Bohemia and Slovakia, and the Jazyges, a Sarmatian people of the Hungarian plain. These groups, along with allies, began crossing Rome's frontiers in force. The Romans were caught off guard, their defenses weakened by the redeployment of legions to the east and then by plague losses. As one modern historian puts it, the empire failed to develop a workable policy for these migrating tribes, alternating between resistance and half measures of accommodation.
Not wise.
In late 167, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus personally marched north toward the Danube with such troops as they could muster. It was unprecedented for an emperor, let alone two, to leave Italy for a distant war in Europe. Along the way, tragedy struck. Lucius Verus died suddenly in early 169, reportedly of a stroke, possibly a victim of the plague. Marcus was left sole emperor and sole commander of the war, bearing the full weight of the conflict on his shoulders. The war proved long and arduous, a series of back-and-forth campaigns rather than one decisive confrontation. In the initial phase, 168 to 172, waves of barbarians breached the Danube line. At one point, a coalition of Marcomanni and others penetrated deep into Roman territory. In 170, they even invaded Italy, a shock not felt since the days of the Republic. The town of Aquileia at the head of the Adriatic was besieged, and panic gripped Rome at the thought of barbarians approaching Italy's heartland. Marcus responded with determination. In this emergency, he took radical measures to shore up Rome's defenses. According to the Historia Augusta, he staged a massive public auction of imperial treasures and palace valuables in Rome, selling gold cups, jewels, and works of art to raise funds for the war. This auction of the imperial treasures held in Trajan's Forum
Sit by the fire for a second.
fulfilled the depleted treasury, enabling the hiring of new troops. Marcus also levied gladiators into the army, even purging the amphitheaters to find able fighters to reinforce the legions. No measure was too drastic. The survival of the empire was at stake. These acts demonstrate Marcus's priorities. He sacrificed personal luxury and entertainment for the common defense, embodying the Stoic principle of placing the greater good above one's own comfort. By 171 to 172, the Romans regained the initiative. Marcus's legions, now bolstered, pushed the invaders back. A major victory was won over the Marcomanni and their allies on the Danube around 173 142, after hard fighting in what is now Austria and Slovakia. The Quadi were also
Let's get some tools and kill some Frostmane troll
In honor
elves.
of these successes, Marcus took the title Germanicus, conqueror of the Germans, and coins proclaimed victory over the Germains.
Oh, he's got to go.
Yet the war was far from over. The conflict settled into a grinding series of campaigns across the Middle Danube region. Marcus established his headquarters at Dernuntum in Pannonia, modern Austria, and spent more time in the field than in Italy. He would remain on campaign for most of the 170s, with only brief interludes back in Rome.
No, you might be right. I might be dead soon.
Later to commemorate the war, bears witness in its spiral reliefs to the nature of this fighting. It depicts not grand triumphs, but grim scenes of battle and suffering. Roman soldiers trudging through forests, fierce skirmishes, the execution of captives, and villages in flames. Unlike conventional set-piece wars, this was a counterinsurgency and frontier push, a slow and bloody succession of small-scale engagements rather than pitched battles. Marcus's own Stoic reflections from these years convey the atmosphere. At one point in the Meditations, perhaps after surveying a battlefield, he reminds himself that humans take pride in trivial conquests. Spiders are proud of catching flies, men of catching hares, fish in a net, boars, bears, or Sarmatians. In another passage, he vividly evokes a slaughtered enemy's corpse, a severed hand or foot, or a decapitated head, noting how such gory sights underscore the transience of life. These lines, Meditations 10.10 and 8.34, likely reflect Marcus's own experience of the war's brutality. The philosopher-emperor did not shrink from the stark realities of combat. Instead, he folded them into his Stoic meditations on fate and mortality. By 175, the Romans had largely contained the northern threat and were poised to make further gains. Marcus may have intended to annex new provinces, Marcomannia and Sarmatia, north of the Danube to permanently secure the frontier, a plan hinted at in later sources. However, just as the Marcomannic War seemed to be winding down, an unexpected crisis erupted in the east. News arrived in summer 175 that Gaius Avidius Cassius, the very general who had saved the Eastern Empire a decade earlier, had rebelled and declared himself emperor. Cassius, then governor of Syria and commander of the Eastern legions, was a highly respected figure and had effectively been ruling the eastern provinces for Marcus. His rebellion may have been triggered by a rumor that Marcus was gravely ill or dead. Indeed, according to some sources, often reflecting later court gossip, Faustina may have encouraged Cassius to claim the throne if Marcus died, to prevent the empire from falling to the untested Commodus.
No, let's not give it to Commodus.
Whatever the cause, Cassius was proclaimed emperor by his troops in Egypt and Syria in the spring of 175.
This is the first hairy situation I'm in.
Egypt, critical as Rome's grain supply, recognized Cassius, threatening a civil war. Marcus's reaction, insofar as records show, was measured and stoic. He is said to have lamented the necessity of fighting a fellow Roman, and according to the Historia Augusta, he even refused to read letters that could have incriminated Cassius's co-conspirators, preferring to forgive if
he
possible.
ran away.
Fortunately for Marcus, the revolt was short-lived. After only 3 months, Cassius was assassinated by one of his own centurions.
That's how it
His head was
goes.
sent to Marcus,
You live by the sword, you die by the
the
sword.
usurper's death, and did not punish Cassius's
Of course,
family.
Christ said that, not Marcus.
The resolution spared Rome a civil war. Nevertheless, Marcus had to reassert his authority in the east. Faustina the Younger, Louvre Museum, Paris. In 175 to 176, Marcus undertook an arduous journey through the eastern provinces, his only major tour of the east during his reign. He traveled with Faustina and their son Commodus across Asia Minor and down into Egypt, becoming the first emperor to set foot in Alexandria since Hadrian. During this journey, Faustina died unexpectedly in late 175 in Cappadocia, perhaps of illness or exhaustion. Marcus, stricken with grief, honored his wife's memory greatly. He had her deified and founded charities in her name. He continued on to Egypt and then back via Greece. In Athens, Marcus engaged in a remarkable act of patronage to philosophy. He was initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, the ancient secret rites of Demeter and Persephone. He also used his visit to Athens to endow the city with new philosophical chairs. In 176, Marcus established 4 permanent chairs in philosophy at Athens, one for each of the major schools: Platonic, Aristotelian, Peripatetic, Stoic, and Epicurean. This was an extraordinary state sponsorship of higher learning, underscoring Marcus's image as a patron of philosophy. Ancient observers were surely reminded of Hadrian and Antoninus, who were great Philhellenes. Marcus followed suit by reinforcing Athens as an intellectual
Trolls must be
center.
cold.
This action by a reigning emperor to fund philosophy professorships was unprecedented, and reflects how Marcus's life as a philosopher was not divorced from his duties as emperor. Even amidst war and rebellion, he took time for cultural policy that would influence future generations of thinkers. Marcus Aurelius, Triumph Sculpture, Capitoline Museums, Rome. After settling affairs in the East, Marcus returned to Rome in 176.
Hey, a
He
troll.
celebrated a joint triumph for the Germanic War and the suppression of Cassius's revolt. By then, he had also elevated his son. In 177, Marcus made 16-year-old Commodus co-emperor, another first. The first time a son would directly succeed his father as emperor in nearly a century.
Even
Since
Marcus
Vespasian.
could make mistakes.
This move not only designated Commodus as the clear successor, but perhaps also aimed to provide him with practical experience in governance and military command alongside his aging father during the ongoing war. But the northern wars were not yet fully concluded. In 177, unrest flared up again on the Danube. Marcus and Commodus together set out for a second campaign against the tribes, seeking to finally stabilize the frontier. Fighting continued into 178 and 179. Marcus, now in his late 50s and in poor health, remained with the army. Contemporary accounts suggest he may have grown weary and ill, likely affected by the toll of years of campaigning and perhaps lingering effects of the plague. Yet he pressed on dutifully. The end came
Poor
in March
health in your
180.
50s, man. That's sad.
Marcus Aurelius died on March 17, 180 AD, at the military outpost of Vindobona, modern Vienna, nearby Sirmia, during the final stages of the Marcomannic War. He was 58 years old. The sources say he succumbed to illness, possibly the plague which re-emerged, or simply a fever worsened
One
by
hand,
his
two
frailty.
hand. One hand, two hand.
According to the Historia Augusta, as he lay dying, he advised Commodus to continue the war and not
think we're
entrust
doing
the state to
two-hand.
slaves, a warning against letting unworthy men run the empire. With Marcus's death, the Marcomannic campaign was hastily concluded by Commodus, who preferred to return to the comforts of Rome. The Roman Senate swiftly deified Marcus Aurelius, as was customary for good emperors.
Okay, we have to go get the
His body
journal.
was likely returned to Rome and placed in Hadrian's mausoleum. Thus passed
go
the
get
last
the journal.
of the 5 good emperors,
Try not to
term
die.
coined later to describe the sequence of Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, who had given the empire nearly a century of able, stable leadership. Marcus's succession marked a turning point. For the first time since AD 96, the new emperor was a direct son of the previous one. Marcus, who himself owed his throne to adoption, had decided to place his 19-year-old son Commodus on the throne rather than adopt an older, proven successor.
Not
The
wise.
reasons were pragmatic. By the late 170s, Commodus was Marcus's only surviving son among many children, and there was no reason to continue the policy of adoption followed by his predecessors. Most historians agree Marcus never seriously considered adopting an heir outside his bloodline. Perhaps he believed that the imperial prestige would ensure
Level
Commodus'
5, guys.
or perhaps
55
paternal
to
love
go.
clouded his judgment. Unfortunately, Commodus would prove to be the polar opposite of his father in character. Within a few years, Commodus's misrule and tyranny would earn him infamy as a second Nero or Caligula. The contrast between the virtuous Marcus and the degenerate Commodus was so striking that Dio and other
these are pretty
contemporaries
good.
openly lamented it. Some later commentators faulted Marcus for nepotism, effectively ending the era of adopted merit-based succession by installing his unfit son. He was the first emperor to pass the throne to his son since Vespasian, Marcus's biographer notes, and sadly, Commodus's reign, 180 to 192, confirmed the fears that heredity was no guarantee of quality. Marcus likely hoped or believed Commodus would rise to the occasion. Instead, Commodus's rule would usher in a century of growing instability. Yet, it must be stressed, none of this was inevitable or clear in 180. At Marcus's death, he was widely
a chest, guys!
The Roman world had lost a wise and fatherly
Let's
ruler,
take it.
one who had kept the empire intact through plague and war.
Little troll up there.
The army, senate, and people revered Marcus's memory.
Robe.
It would only be with hindsight that Marcus's decision to leave power to Commodus would be seen as a flawed choice. In his own time, Marcus Aurelius was remembered as the ideal philosopher-emperor who had governed justly and left an enduring legacy of wisdom. Challenges of plague and economy. Throughout Marcus Aurelius's reign, a series of grave challenges tested his administration
the
beyond
gold to come back.
Foremost among these was the Antonine plague, which raged for years and constituted one of the worst pandemics of antiquity. Having likely originated in the east, some accounts pin its first outbreak on Varus's army in 165, the plague swept through the empire in wave after wave. At its height, thousands died daily in Rome. One report by the ancient physician Galen, who witnessed it, described victims suffering fever, diarrhea, and a characteristic skin eruption, leading many historians to suspect smallpox. The toll was horrific.
I do not
Cities
want
were depopulated,
to
army units
leave
left
this
under
cave
strength,
by
and
foot.
agricultural and economic production slumped due to labor shortage.
Which is wise.
The plague in Rome, Jules Delaunay.
Let us not die.
d'Orsay, Paris. Marcus Aurelius had to manage this crisis on multiple fronts. He organized and financed relief efforts, perhaps using the frumentations, grain doles, and alimenta, welfare funds for children, to support the populace through hard times. The plague reappeared intermittently, notably again in 189 after Marcus's death, indicating it persisted. The psychological effect on Marcus is hinted in Meditations, where he frequently reflects on mortality, the fragility of life, and the inevitability
Be nice
of
to
death.
go back to Rome and
40 years or 20,
give the empire penicillin.
Living amid a pandemic no doubt reinforced his Stoic teachings that death is natural and not to be feared. Gregory Hayes notes that between 169
Not that I
and
would know how to do it
Marcus
if I
endured the loss
found
of many
myself
loved ones and
taken
constant
back.
stress. And in these dark times,
It's the mold
it is only
rye
natural
bread,
that
I
he sought
think,
consolation in
something
philosophy.
like that.
The devastating human toll of
Perhaps
the plague
tonight,
inevitably translated into
as I
severe
try to
economic
sleep,
strain.
I will
Financially, the prolonged
read
wars compounded this
how one
pressure
makes
on the imperial
penicillin.
treasury.
in the off
The
chance
costs
I
of
find my way
continuous
back in
military
Rome.
operations were enormous. New legions had been raised. Marcus formed Legio, 2 Italica, and 3 Italica, for instance, and existing ones needed replenishment with costly recruitment incentives. Meanwhile, tax revenues likely fell as populations declined due to the plague and trade was disrupted by both war and disease.
What's on your mind?
Flags of the Legio, 2 Italica and 3 Italica.
Ooh, that's a much better
Meanwhile,
shield.
tax revenues likely fell as populations declined and trade was disrupted
Look how
by
handsome
war and
that
disease.
is.
To address budget shortfalls, Marcus took measures such as debasing the currency slightly, a common resort. The silver denarius purity was reduced during his reign, which helped meet expenditures but sowed some long-term inflation. More dramatically, as mentioned, Marcus held a 2-month auction of imperial property around 169 to generate quick funds. Priceless golden goblets, statues, silk garments, and even the imperial furniture were put on sale to wealthy bidders. This unprecedented yard sale in the Forum raised considerable money that was immediately funneled to the legions and to fortifications. Later, when finances improved, Marcus even allowed those who bought items to return them for reimbursement, a gesture noted in the Historia Augusta as evidence of his honesty, though few took up the offer. Such acts showed Marcus's resolve to sacrifice personal luxury for the empire's needs.
Ooh,
His reputation for personal austerity only grew. The people saw an emperor who would pawn the palace silver to defend them, a far cry from emperors who seized others' wealth to fund their excesses. Another internal challenge was maintaining morale and order on the home front during these crises.
Mace.
In Rome, Marcus had to keep the Senate and populace cooperative despite hardships.
Okay.
He continued the tradition of
Let's
public
go.
games and shows when possible, but at the height of the emergency, he even closed the gladiatorial schools and amphitheaters to redirect manpower and resources to the army. This cannot have been popular among the masses who loved their entertainment.
Bread and
Marcus's
circuses.
leadership and the obvious
Bread
necessity
and
carried the
circuses.
day. There were no reported revolts or serious unrest in Rome during his rule. The Historia Augusta does preserve some grumblings that Marcus was not very gregarious. He did not attend as many banquets or circus spectacles, which made him seem distant. But others interpreted this as dignified restraint. Even the sarcastic commentator Cassius Dio remarked that while Marcus was lucky in avoiding troubles, he admirably survived and preserved the empire through them. This points to Marcus's success in
They are all
steering
dead,
the
it
ship
appears.
through the storm. Rome survived
Okay
the
with
onslaught
that.
of plague and barbarians largely intact. Marcus also faced natural disasters during his tenure. There was a major earthquake in Asia Minor in the city of Smyrna in 178, and floods of the Tiber in Rome. Typical events in any reign, but potentially destabilizing when added to other woes. Marcus provided aid in rebuilding in these cases, earning him love in the provinces. In one instance, when an earthquake hit Cyzicus, Marcus personally funded its reconstruction. All these efforts fed into his image as a benevolent, conscientious ruler. One difficult aspect of Marcus's later years was the question of succession amid turmoil. After the brief rebellion of Avidius Cassius in 175, Marcus understood the importance of a smooth succession to prevent further civil strife.
Done
He had
more
already
bro.
begun elevating Commodus. The youth was given prominent public roles, joined Marcus on campaign, and was acclaimed imperator along with his father after victories. In 177, Marcus took the significant step of making Commodus co-Augustus, sharing the throne officially. Commodus was only 15, but exceptionally, the Senate and army accepted him, mostly out of their immense respect for Marcus. Cassius Dio notes that many in the Senate likely hoped Marcus would outlive the war, and Commodus would mature under his guidance. In a sense, Marcus was trying to secure the frontier and the future in one stroke, finishing the war and ensuring a stable transfer of power. Sadly, he did not live much longer to oversee Commodus's development. The planning he put into succession was wise in theory. There was no civil war at his death, since Commodus was already the recognized emperor. The tragedy was that Commodus proved unworthy of the opportunity. It is a testament to Marcus's essential goodness and hope that he truly believed his son could carry on his work. Marcus did everything he could to leave the empire better than he found it, but in entrusting it to Commodus, fate played a cruel trick on his legacy. Nonetheless, in the immediate aftermath of Marcus's reign, the Roman world remembered him for how he confronted these severe challenges. Later Roman writers, even those living through the troubled 3rd century, looked back at Marcus Aurelius's time as a last golden age of the Pax Romana. The 4th century historian Eutropius succinctly said, Marcus was a man who throughout his life, both at home and abroad, conducted himself with the greatest excellence, and was a great aid to the state by his temperance and wisdom. The combination of plague, economic strain, and endless war that Marcus faced would have broken lesser men, or turned them into tyrants. Marcus, by contrast, remained faithful to his Stoic ideals, governing with reason
Thank
and
you.
clemency.
I will need this.
Marcus and the Christians. One aspect of Marcus Aurelius's reign that has invited much debate is his attitude toward the emerging religious sect of Christianity. By Marcus's time, Christianity had spread across the empire in small communities, still a minority faith often viewed with suspicion by Roman authorities. The question is often asked, did the philosopher-emperor persecute the Christians? The evidence from his reign is mixed, and
A lot of
historical
people in
opinions
here.
vary. During the
Need
2nd
water, we
century,
don't need
persecution
food.
of Christians was largely ad hoc. There was no systematic empire-wide campaign from the top. Instead, local governors handled Christians according to general imperial policy, derived
City
from
Mall.
Trajan's guidance to not seek them out, but if they are accused and refuse to recant, punish them. Under Antoninus Pius, a relatively tolerant stance prevailed, though isolated incidents occurred. Under Marcus
Got
Aurelius,
some things to learn,
ethnic
guys.
persecutions did increase in some regions,
Judgment.
though it's unclear how much Marcus knew or
Blessing of
directed these
might.
actions.
It's awesome.
Notably, one of the most famous early Christian martyrdoms happened during Marcus's reign, the martyrs of Lyon in Gaul in 177 AD. According to the church historian Eusebius, who preserves a letter from the Christian communities of Lyon and Vienne, a violent persecution broke out in Lugdunum, Lyon.
Let's get up
Christians
here.
were mobbed, beaten, dragged to prison, and many, including the slave girl Blandina and the bishop Pothinus, were cruelly tortured and executed in the arena. This episode is one of the clearest cases of Christian suffering under Marcus. Eusebius even states that the provincial governor wrote to the emperor for instructions during the trials. If true, that indicates Marcus was at least consulted. Unfortunately, we do not know Marcus's direct reply. Some scholars suspect that Marcus, upon being asked, likely told the governor to enforce the law, meaning those Christians who refused to sacrifice to the Roman gods would face the death penalty, standard under Trajan's rescript. Marcus's own stance probably mirrored the traditional Roman view. Christians were odd dissidents who obstinately refused to honor the state cult, and thus could be seen as subversive or atheists, denying the gods. In the Roman mindset, this could be dangerous in times of crisis, angering the gods and destabilizing social unity. Beheading of Saint Justin, John Leucken, Rijksmuseum, Amsterdam. It is important, however, not to exaggerate Marcus's role. Contemporary pagan sources barely mention Christians in connection with Marcus. The Historia Augusta notes only briefly that under Marcus's rule, the prefect Junius Rusticus, Marcus's mentor, tried and executed several Christians in Rome, including the famed apologist Justin Martyr. Justin, a Christian philosopher, was beheaded in Rome around 165 after a trial for impiety, hence his surname, Martyr. The surviving acts of Justin's trial show he was condemned for refusing to sacrifice to the gods, a decision likely approved by the emperor in principle. Marcus's friend Rusticus was simply applying the law. Marcus was no doubt aware of Christianity, but there is no reason to think that it bulked large in his mind. Indeed, nowhere in Meditations does Marcus explicitly mention Christians. There is a line in Meditations 11.3 that some thought to reference Christians' obstinacy, but scholars, including Gregory Hayes, believe that sentence is a later interpolation, not...
All right, we made it to level 5. We're in Steel Grill's Depot, and we've learned a little bit about Marcus Aurelius. I'll catch you guys later.